The Bite of the Mango, Chapter 16. Since my outbursts, Yabam, Miriama, and David had given up trying to force me to eat by holding a fork between my fake fingers or to go for walks wearing the contraption. Slowly, they stopped protesting when I say, "Not today, let's practice tomorrow." In turn, I showed them that I could tie the laces on my running shoes, do up the zippers on my sweaters and jackets, and twist off jar lids and bottle tops using my arms and teeth. I even started to cook my own food, mostly rice with hot peppers, chicken and fish that Yabam and I bought at the market. "I guess we made a mistake thinking the prosthetic hands would benefit you," David said sympathetically one night. "No," I replied. "Maybe one day I'll get used to wearing them, but for now, I like doing things on my own. Thank you for your help, David. I learned a lot in England." And I really had. Even though the adults viewed my experience as a failure, I could read some English now, including street signs I recognized. I knew my numbers up to 100, but most of all, I had found the self-confidence in England to listen to my inner voice and speak up for what I needed and wanted. I left London for Freetown on another rainy day. In my carry-on suitcase were my plastic prosthetic hands, carefully wrapped in tissue paper. The ones I'd been fitted for had replaced the metal device. But with my plastic hands were smaller and lighter and fit snugly around my arms, I still could do more things without them. Another thing I had discovered about myself in London was that I loved fashion. Packed alongside my prosthetic hands was a pair of black leather boots with stiletto heels. "Where will you ever wear those things?" Yabam had said when I asked her to buy them for me. "And how will you walk in them?" In fact, I'd worn them everywhere. By the time I left London, I'd come to enjoy walking around the city with my arms stuck in my pockets of a navy blue wool coat that actually fit, and wearing one of Miriama's silk scarves and those fancy boots. Once we were seated on the airplane, I slid the blind down over the window beside me. I didn't want to see outside. As we accelerated and took off, getting closer and closer to the clouds and then going through them, every bump of turbulence saw me leaping for Yabun's arm and squeezing it tight. Most of the other passengers slept on the airplane, but I dared not even close my eyes for fear that the plane might crash. I listened attentively to every word the flight attendants spoke in English. I even understood some of what they were saying. I ate a tiny bit of my plain chicken and potato dinner, and then, just before we set to land, I put on some makeup. I was nearly 15 now, and in London, Yabam had let me try on her makeup. Before we left for Freetown, Miriama had bought me some lip gloss, pink eyeshadow, and brown eyeliner from my very own, as well as a small case to carry the makeup in. It was nearly midnight when Yabam and I arrived in Lungri International Airport, located across the Sierra Leone River from Freetown. Despite the late hour, the airport was bustling with porters and custom officers. One of the officers stamped my green Sierra Leone passport and then waved me through. Outside the airport, young boys whistled at Yvonne and me, thrusting their hands out for money. Both the hot, humid air and the sight of boys hit me like a brick. There were kids like me, with family depending on them to earn a few leones to buy vegetables and rice. The airport was a good place for them to be. Newly arriving foreigners, mostly employed by aid organizations, were often generous after their long flights. Yabam gave a boy some leones to put in our suitcase on a buggy and escort us to one of the waiting taxi minibuses. About 15 of us, all foreigners except for Yabam and me, squeezed onto the bus. The taxi drove right onto the ferry. When we were midway across the river, I got out of the bus and walked to the railing. I inhaled the familiar air, thick with the smells of burning coal and hot spices. "I'm home," I thought. I smiled. But then a cold shiver ran through me. What if I don't ever leave Sierra Leone again? I just can't go back to a life of begging. A part of me felt at that moment I had made a terrible mistake by returning. I didn't share this feeling with Yabam when I returned to the taxi. She had dozed off, and I awakened her only when we reached the other side and I saw her husband there to greet us. He loaded our luggage into a beat-up old car he had borrowed from a friend, jumped in the back seat while Yvonne and sat up front beside her husband. The streets were alive even at this late hour, with people standing by fires, frying cassava, or trying to sleep on straw mats, right on the cement or on the dirt road. I was very tired, and I was just about to fall asleep when Yvonne's husband turned left after a Freetown clock tower. "Where are you going?" I asked, suddenly alert and leaning forward. "To our home," said Yvonne. "But I want to go back to the camp," I exclaimed. "You can't, Mariatu," Yvonne said, swinging around to face me. On this, I must put my foot down. "Why?" I asked. "I want to see my family." "But your family has moved to a village near Masaka," she answered. Only a few members of my family had moved, I cried out. "I still have relatives and friends at Aberdeen. Please take me there." "Listen, Mariatu," Yvonne said softly and sternly. "In this country there is much suffering still. The war may have ended, but many, many people are homeless, still unable to return to their villages. Many, many people are injured like you. Sierra Leoneans may appear to be happy for your good fortune in going to England and now Canada, but deep down they are jealous. They want what you have. They will do things like hire women who practice witchcraft to cast spells on you so that bad fortune comes your way." "I'm not scared of these people," I said. "No one I know would want evil to come to me, not after everything I have been through. Take me back to the camp." Yabam gazed at me silently for a few moments. "Mariatu," she said eventually, "I want to help, but you have to listen to me. And you have to trust me," I said, raising my voice. "You said in London you would. I want to go to Aberdeen." "Let her go where she wants," Yabam's husband cut in. "She's old enough to decide." He turned the vehicle into a bumpy back alley lined with potholes, and before long we merged back onto the road that led to Aberdeen. As we pulled up alongside the camp, I could see the burning fires. I heard people talking and dogs barking. "I'll go in by myself," I said to Yvonne, who had jumped out of the car and opened the door for me. "Against my better judgment, I will trust you," she said. "I will come to see you in a few days. You're going to be all right, Mariatu. You are going to be all right." I pulled up the handle of my suitcase and slung the long strap of my carry-on bag over my shoulder. "Have a nice stay with your husband," I said to Yabam as I turned to enter the camp. "We'll be back together soon and going to Canada. Don't you worry about that." "Hello! Hello!" I called out. Muhammad, Ibrahim, Abdul, and Fatmata were really happy to see me when I woke them up. I knew that Yabam's calls home that the couple now had a daughter, Mariatu, named after me. Fatmata folded me into her arms, sobbing. Muhammad joked around as usual. "You just couldn't live without me," he laughed. "Maybe you and I should get married." "Ha ha," I said, making a face. But I had to admit that he looked smashing in a white tank top and pants. "What happened to you while I was away?" I teased. "You become a more movie star." "Ah, what?" he said. "Never mind," I said, embracing him. I had forgotten for a moment that Muhammad had never seen a television program or a movie. For the first little while at the camp, I was able to feed everyone quite well, buying fish and goat with some money David and Marima had given me. I bought a big bag of rice at the market that Abdul and Fatmata had to carry home together on their heads. We got small vegetables too, an avocado, pineapple, coconut, and plantain. Although the pickings at the market were slim, Fatmata explained that many of the crops had been destroyed during the war, and farmers were only slowly returning to the work. Even if you could afford food in Freetown, that didn't mean you could escape starvation. No longer after my return, I went to visit Victor. Several members of the theater troupe had moved away, he told me. Some had returned to their villages. Others had received houses built by the Norwegian non-profit groups, just as Adamsi, Marie, and Ellie had. "The government is moving people to these houses," said Victor worriedly, "but they're far, far from their home villages. Some members of the troupe went alone to these places without family or friends. It's just not right." The theater troupe, he said, was also slowly losing money. Now that the war had ended, non-profit groups weren't giving the troupe as much support. I'm doing what I can, said Victor. He explained that he was writing a report about the benefits of the theater in the emotional healing of both victims of the war and child soldiers. 10 members of the troop remained at the camp. On weekends, we would meet at the center, as in the past, to perform our skits, dance, and sing, but mostly we'd sit around and talk. How is England, my friend? Meminatu asked me one day. Very cold, I replied. You wouldn't have liked it. Even though I hadn't believed Yvonne when she said people would be jealous out out to get me, I didn't say too much about England or Canada to my friends and family. I realized soon after returning to the camp how incredibly lucky I was to be able to leave. I didn't want to make others feel worse about their situation. Come on, it must have been more than that, Meminatu said. Where are your new hands? I don't see you wearing any. I didn't know how to reply. There was a non-profit group based at the camp fitting amputees with metal devices, like the one I had in England, as well as plastic hands, feet, and legs. People were using their prosthetic hands to eat, drink, cook, and clean themselves, but I felt most comfortable doing things on my own, with the body parts I had remaining. I think I had felt so different from everybody else when I had Abdul that now I desperately wanted to blend in. And when I'd hidden my arms and walked around London in those tall black boots, I felt stylish, like I belonged in the city. Comfort arrived at our tent one afternoon, plopped herself down on a stone, and announced that she, not Yabam, would be organizing my trip to Canada. And I'll be coming with you, she grinned. I tried not to show my dismay. I had come to love Yabam like a mother. Bill was sending me about $50 a month, which was enough combined with my remaining money from London that I didn't need to beg anymore. It took a few months for Comfort to make the arrangements for my Canadian visa. Yabam was right. There was no Canadian consulate or Canadian government office in Freetown, so I had to travel in the neighboring country of Ghana to complete my application. Comfort accompanied me on the short flight, but unlike Yabam, she didn't let me hold on tight to her arm as we took off. Miriatu, you've flown so much now. You should be used to this. She laughed. She lifted my arm and put it back on my lap. Shortly after our return, Comfort informed me that we were scheduled to leave for Canada in a few days. But I want to visit my mother and father, I protested. I need more time. Why didn't you tell me earlier? I only received the airline tickets today, she replied. I didn't know either, so pack your things and get ready. I was too far to travel to visit my mother or my grandmother, whom I wanted to hug one more time. My grandmother was old by now, and I feared she might die before I returned to Sierra Leone. However, I decided I would visit Marie, Ellie, and Adamsi in their new village. I didn't tell Comfort my plan, as I thought she'd say no to that. I had a young man from the camp named Alucine take her a message as I flagged down the Pota Pota headed to Maseka, then the nearest big village. It shouldn't have taken more than an hour to reach the village, but the road hadn't been maintained during the 11-year Civil War. It was full of potholes so deep that the minibus often had to swerve into the thick elephant grass to avoid sinking. Even though I had left the camp in mid-morning, I didn't reach my destination until late afternoon. Adamsi Marina Lee's new village, located right off the main road, was a series of 10 new clay huts with tin roofs. The place didn't have a name yet, and my relatives knew few of their neighbors. I recognized a couple of people from the camp, Marie told me, but we know no one well. Our family is now all over the place, she lamented out. We live among strangers. It's not right that I have to ask the woman grinding cassava beside me her name. Maria, Ali, and the others had tilled and planted a new farm. The crops wouldn't be ready for another year, so they were using the money Bill sent me while I was in England to buy produce. There was a lake not far from where Ali did a lot of fishing. I had planned to stay with Adamsi and my aunt and uncle all night long, but just as some boys had lit a big bonfire and the girls were donning grass skirts for dancing, Alicine, the boy from the camp, showed up. You have to come now, he said, breathing heavily from running. I stood up quickly in shock. Even in the firelight, I could see he was covered from head to toe in red clay dust. How did you get here? I asked. I took a pota, but it stopped in my scut and refueling, he replied, still panting. Gas is so scarce, the driver told it could be an hour or two before some was available. I ran from there. Adamsi was looking sadly off into the fire. We both knew Elise's presence would cut my visit short. Comfort says you must return to Freetown now, Alicine continued. She gave me some money to bring you home. You have to fill out some paperwork in the morning or you'll miss your flight. It isn't for another 2 days, I said. Comfort says to come. You have to come now. I sat down in front of Adamsi and put my forehead against hers. I love you, I whispered. I always will, and soon it will be your turn.